Hey everybody, welcome back to LED Live. We've got an awesome show today. I know you're going to be blessed. And have you ever been through anything tragic that you've wondered, can God truly turn something good out of a tragedy?
Find out on this episode of LED Live.
You guys are awesome for tuning in today, and we want to thank you guys so much for checking out this video and watching our ministry. If you're new here, we hope that you'll stick around. We've got a lot of content that is tackling a wide variety of subjects, but today we're going to talk about something that is kind of a sensitive topic and something that is very hard for some people, especially if you've experienced a terrible, terrible tragedy in your life. But this is a beautiful story about how God can transform something and turn it for His glory, His good. And so I want to welcome you guys, John and Jeanette, as you guys will hear a little bit of your testimony of how and why they even have gotten together. This is your mother.
My biological mother.
And when did you meet her?
I met her about 6 weeks ago. 6
weeks ago.
Wow.
Okay, so you guys are going to want to unpack this story a little bit for us because, I can only imagine meeting your biological parent for the first time and the emotions and everything that goes along with that. I'm really excited to hear you guys' testimony. When I saw this video that you guys had been working on, and it was your testimony and the way that it was edited together and everything, I was eating my lunch, I think when it got sent to me. And I'll tell you, man, you guys pulled some major tears out of my eyes.
Me too.
And I was like sitting there kind of like crying, and my coworkers were probably like, what's wrong with this guy?
I saw it too in my car, and I was like, man, I was just crying too the whole time. It's amazing, you know.
I think me and John cried the most though, out of all of it.
I cry every time I look at it. Yeah, every time I think about it. It's very emotional.
And when I get to share the story with just a stranger, I get emotional at that moment too.
So let's dive right into this, because I know you're going to need some time here to develop what went on. So start way back into sort of the beginning of your guys' journey. I don't know who wants to kind of share first, but
I'll start.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll start. Not ladies first, but
No, go ahead. You explain it better.
I think I'll start because I didn't know the whole story. I was adopted when I was a baby, and I grew up in a beautiful home, lots of love. My parents are Christian, deeply committed to God, and they taught my sister and I that serving God and humanity is our highest calling. And so that was a really valuable gift they gave us. And so I ended up becoming a pastor and traveling the world, preaching the gospel. I've seen thousands of people give their lives to Jesus Christ and wait on His promise to return one day. And 42 countries, 6 continents.
Wow.
And so saying all that to say it was just a beautiful journey for me. Of course, I had some trauma and tragedies in my life, but I was protected from things that could have destroyed me. But in all of that, though, I carried this really insatiable curiosity, and it's hard to explain. But when you're adopted, no matter how much love you have in your life, you still want to know. And maybe there's some people that disagree with that, but I'm pretty sure that's every person I know that's adopted, that's the case. Yeah. And I wanted to know.
Now, when you were younger, I'm assuming you found out when you were younger, how old were you and how did that come about?
I was about 6 years old, and it wasn't as formal as you might think. My cousins were playing, and we have a very big family. My mom had 12 brothers and sisters. They all just about lived in the same area.
Oh, wow.
We get together at my grandmother's house every Sunday and holidays. And so one of those gatherings, we were all together. My cousins were playing double Dutch jump rope, where you use the 2 ropes. And I was teasing them, grabbing the rope. And one of my older cousins, this is how I remember it. My mom says it didn't happen this way. This is how I remember it. She said, "That's why you're adopted." So I ran in the house in front of everybody. I said, "Mom, am I adopted?" And my mom's like, "Well, yeah." And I said, "So does this mean you're not my mom? I don't have to listen to you?" And so I was a mischievous kid. And so we had a talk later on. They shared, as I got older, the non-identifying information about my biological family. It was a closed adoption. So all I had was questions. I had very little information, very few details, just enough to say, don't eat this because you might die because this is what could killed your mom, you know, in terms of allergies and things like that, medical information. But I guess I wanted to point out that I carried that for 38 years, this sense of, well, was I not good enough? What was it? And some adoptees, when they're adopted, they rebel as a way to deal with being adopted. Some become people pleasers. I think that's even more dangerous because then your identity is tied into what other people think. And unfortunately, that's kind of how I was. It was a good thing I was a preacher because, but it was a bad thing if I had a church that didn't care for me, because then I felt like my mistakes were my identity. And it was hard for me to separate. I felt very differently about rejection than someone who may not have been adopted. And I carried that for 38 years. And even with all the love I got, love from teachers and camp counselors and my parents and siblings and cousins and church members. But saying that to say, I didn't know my full story. And so,
And so it's just in the back of your mind constantly, you know, you probably, you know, have that thought on your head a lot in your earlier life.
Sure.
So what made you eventually want to say, you know what, I feel like I want to know. I want to know the truth, like about where I came from and, you know, what happened. How did that all come about?
Well, I had a few false starts. So maybe in my early 20s, I set out and contacted the adoption agency on my information pack, and it was a closed adoption, so there wasn't very far to go. Then you could make an appeal to the state and open the record, and I went down, I was like, oh, that's too expensive, and I realized maybe as I look back, I just wasn't ready. These false starts, I just really wasn't truly ready, maybe because I was afraid I'd be rejected. And when you carry that sense of rejection, not knowing where you came from, you kind of set yourself up for failure. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, it won't work out anyway.
That's something I haven't really thought about before. You know what I mean? Like the idea of what if you go and seek out who your biological parent is and they don't want anything to do with you? Is that going to send your thoughts deeper into, you know?
Very pervasive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard beautiful stories about adoption reunions, and I would cry, and you know, my family would notice I turned the channel really quick if one of these shows came up because I just didn't want to deal with it. But I think there's this pervasive thought. I did hear horror stories too, like I gave you up, don't contact me ever again. Wow. So I was like, I don't know if I want to deal with that.
I think either way though, you get some kind of closure, right? Because even like a bad breakup, you want just tell me you'll never be with me again so I can get on with my life, right?
True. Yeah. That's true. Yeah, and I think I got to that place about a year ago. I was living in Australia, and a very good friend of mine encouraged me. He's like, man, you know what, don't you want to know where you came from? And I was like, well, I do, but I'm busy. I've got so much going on. I can do it. And he just kind of pushed and pushed and pushed. And sometimes, you know, it's good to have a crazy friend that loves you so much that they want to support you forward, you know? And he was that. And so I did that. I ordered the test, but I held on to it for about a year, a DNA test, one of these at-home kits.
Yeah, wow.
And then when I finally took it and I got the results, I thought it was a lot simpler than it is. I thought it would say, this is your mother and your father, and this all the way back to Adam. This is where you come from.
Right.
Not exactly like that. So it kind of shows my ignorance on this thing.
Right.
And with that being said, I did have a very closely related cousin, and I reached out, and basically they blocked me. Like, I don't really want to have anything to do with you. Don't contact me. And so there, it kind of sparked that sense of, oh man, this is exactly, and I kind of said that to someone. I was like, this is exactly why I didn't want to do this. I knew this was going to happen. And so I let it go. Then a global pandemic hit.
Oh, right.
And you start painting walls that needed to be painted,
Right.
planting
Yeah.
flowers that needed to be planted. In my case, it wasn't walls or flowers. It was like, let me go back to this DNA stuff.
Yeah.
And so I went back to it, and I actually had a message from a very closely related cousin. And he said, hey, I'm in Illinois. I see you're in Michigan. I'd be happy to connect if you're interested. If not, no worries. And I'm like, yo, this is awesome.
That just happened organically. That person hit you up.
He reached out to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this is a relative through your mother.
This is a biological relative through my mother.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. I didn't know how the connection was, but I did know that my biological family was Caucasian, white.
Right.
I knew that my mother was blonde hair, blue eyes. These are descriptors that I had.
Yeah.
And so, I remember as a kid, I'd be in the grocery store, like, that could be her.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I mean, what that would do to your mind, like walking around, for sure.
And my family was open about it. My sister, she was like, oh, you were the cutest puppy in the Humane Society. So it wasn't, and we had so much love, man. I have to share the rejection part, because I think sometimes as Christians, and I'm guilty of it, we act as though when we come to Christ that our pain disappears. It does dissipate, but it doesn't disappear. That's and right. He heals us, and everyone knows that a healing process is not instant.
That's right.
But forgiveness is, and that's the beautiful thing. So I said, sure, let's do it. So we got together, became really good friends. We hung out, we talked, and he was like, man, you should find your birth mother. And he didn't know his birth mother.
Oh, wow.
He was adopted as well. So we were connected, but neither of us knew our birth parents, okay?
Wow.
And at any rate, his situation wasn't like mine. He had some difficulties in his journey that he shares freely. I can share that without feeling like I'm betraying a confidence. And at any rate, I posted a picture of us on a site called DNA Detectives. It's got hundreds of thousands of people, and they're search angels that help you reunite with your birth family.
Wow.
They had several thousand likes, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. This is what these people do. But someone reached out to me. Several people reached out, but one person stood out in particular, and she said, with the information you have, and knowing that who this cousin is, I can find your birth mother, and I can find her tonight.
Whoa.
Wow.
And I was like, oh.
And these people aren't asking for any money or anything.
No, a search angel. Angels never ask for money.
Praise God for people like this in our world that just want to. I mean, that's what everybody's life should be about, right? How can I bless somebody else?
Yeah.
What can I do for somebody else? What a beautiful thing.
She didn't even like thank you. She's just like, listen, I just want you to go forward. Just find her. And she helped me manage expectations. This is what happens. Sometimes people are excited at first, and then they talk to their family. Then they tell you don't contact them. Sometimes people just have a one-time reunion, and that's it. And she helped me manage that really well. Basically, she's like, John, expect nothing. Yeah. And that way, if you get something, it's better. But if you get nothing, at least you were ready for it.
Wow.
And so she, I was speaking virtually in the Cayman Islands. And I spoke, and she actually tuned into my message. And she's like, oh, my father was a preacher. And she was in Charlotte. And she was like, I was like, oh, I got married in Charlotte. And I just knew this was the right person. But I wasn't confident she would find my birth mother. I didn't know if my birth mother would be alive. I didn't know if she would want to deal with me or talk to me.
Right.
And so about 12 hours later, in the morning, I woke up overnight. I got a message from this search angel. Her name's Amy. And she said, this is her. And she said, the only way this is not her is if she has a sister that's the same age as her who got pregnant and gave up a child for adoption at the same exact time. And that's the only way this is not your mother. Wow. And she said, but to be certain, I need her mother's maiden name. So reach out to her. I was like, no, you reach out to her. She's like, no, you reach out to her. And I was like, no, go ahead. She's like, no, you go ahead. And so I did, and I kind of had to build up. You know how you like, I can do this.
Psych yourself out, for sure.
So I psyched myself up, and I sent a message, and I said, hey, I'm trying to put together a family tree, and I have a search angel researcher helping me. And I need to know your mother's maiden name. I know this is strange, but this is who I am. You can Google me, and if you gave me this, it'd be very helpful.
Were you sweating to push the send button, just like?
No, you know what? I had psyched myself up all day. I waited until like midnight that night. Well, I was like, I'm going to sleep, Sin, and just
whatever.
I got it that morning, from what I can recall in my messages.
Wow.
Yeah. And when I got up, I had a response.
So immediately, did you know
what
this was, or where it was coming from?
There's so much scam and things going on social media, and I didn't know I'm thinking, wait a minute. I thought the worst at first, and I did for a little while, and I thought, well, wait a minute, he's got information here.
Right.
That, why does he need my mother's name? And then I proceeded to tell him, I said, look, I need to know who this is. I said, I lost a son. He then turned around and said, what do you mean you lost a son?
Well, you said, how do you think we're connected?
Yeah.
And I didn't want to say, I think you're my mom. So I said,
Right.
well, if I had that, I'd know. And then she said, well, I lost a son. And I
Yeah.
said, well, what do you mean you lost a son?
And I told him, I said, I had to give a child up to protect him. And he started going over his birthday,
She
when he was
like,
born.
I gave up a boy
and
then in that place.
my emotions
So,
went
yeah, your
out
heart's
the
probably
roof.
racing.
I couldn't even talk. I had taken my mother to the doctor. I said, look, I need some time. My emotions were uncomprehendable. It was just, you couldn't explain it.
Wow.
And I called his brother first, and I said, I think my son has reached out to me.
Oh, wow.
And this is amazing because when we hear stories like this, it's usually from the child's perspective,
Right.
you know, looking out and trying to find their birth parent. Imagine the shock of the parent, like, whoa,
Yeah, I
like,
can't.
Yeah,
this
like,
happened so long
kinda
ago,
scary.
and now you're on my doorstep, like the emotions that come with that.
Yeah.
And it had been 38 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
38 years.
So I
Yeah.
feel like we need a backstory on what was going on in your life because we don't know that yet. I'm curious, like,
Yeah,
you
so-
get this message. Were you expecting a message? Were you
I
wanting a
had
message?
prayed. From the time I let John go, when I carried him from the delivery room, I held him. I knew because of the background
How
with
did you,
this story.
do you mind sharing how you
No.
decided?
I decided what I needed to do because in my third trimester, I was in a very bad abusive relationship. And the man that I was with tried to make me lose John. And I knew at that point in my third trimester that by the time he was born, I would have to do something. But what? And as it got closer and closer, I just kept getting nudged toward let him go to adoption. I didn't believe in abortion or anything like that. And so I let him go with a kiss and a prayer. It was that prayer that I've held on to for 38 years through God's grace, that I would get to meet him and see him before I pass this world.
Wow.
And it was God's grace that brought him to me.
Wow.
So I let him go, but he was brought back.
And we serve a God of answered prayers.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You pray, and it's amazing that He and His timing works that out. You know?
Yes.
Yeah, I was, hearing the story from Mom, I thought about this verse in Psalms 94, for 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday when it is past, and it's like a watch in the night.
Wow.
And 38 years seemed like forever, but I tell you, in the video, the mini doc that we're sharing, that in the moment that we talked, I forgot the 38 years.
Wow, really?
It meant nothing anymore. It was just like an instant.
Yeah.
And let me tell you how John came about. I call him the evil one. And I was separated from him for a short time, and I got raped. And I knew he would be a mixed baby. I didn't have a problem with that. It had nothing to do with racism. It had nothing to do with rejection. It was all in a matter of protecting him and making sure that he was never hurt by anyone near me.
So you made Mom, the first time we talked, she asked me to forgive her.
Yeah, that's the first thing I
And
asked you.
I didn't, I had a lot of feelings. I didn't know what to feel. I still don't know what to feel.
Wow.
But the only one I'm clear on is gratitude. Because when she shared with me that I'm a product of rape,
Wow.
and she shared with me that the man she was with in a relationship was abusive and beat her in her third trimester with me to try to kill me.
Wow.
And when she shared that she had to give me up to give me safe passage, and knowing the family I was raised in, I'm grateful. I have
And
gratitude.
I'm grateful to his family because in my eyes, God knew when I had to let him go that he already had a family picked out for him.
Yeah.
And I'm utmost thankful to the family he has. You know, even though I'm his biological mother, I'm grateful to his family.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, we get a lot of comments from people, when the topic of abortion comes up, it's always like, well, I think there's times that you should be able to do it, rape and all these things. But think about this. I mean, you're a pastor. You were a pastor. Like, if your mother would have decided to abort you, that's one person who led multiple people to the Lord who wouldn't have come about.
42 countries. I mean, the fact that you have had this kind of influence over so many people is just adds such a beauty to this story, because it's like, you know, here, think of all the people that would have been robbed of a blessing had you just, like, you know, not made it through that. And so, you know, this is a testament of truly, you know, God can take a situation like that. He can turn it around for His glory, and you know, what a beautiful thing.
And this is not the end of our journey. I don't have 38 years left, or I can't make that up. So this is only the beginning of our journey as a family together from our end.
You know what's so beautiful when I think of like that resurrection day? That the angels will personally carry the babies to their mothers, and that just interaction that's going to happen between people. I mean, you know, I can only imagine a mother, like my wife has a different connection with my children than I do. You can see there's this bond that is just, it's on a different level. It's just different, and that never goes away. Even though you had what? Days with him, maybe, you know,
not even hours.
Not even hours. I had John naturally, and I mean, it was a quick labor, and no sooner than I had him, and they bundled him up, and they had us on the bed, and I was holding him, and when we got to our room, and I gave him that kiss and that prayer, that was it. It was the last time I saw him.
Can I ask, and you don't have to answer this if
fine.
you don't want to, what was going on in your emotions, in your heart, after you went home from that hospital and the days afterwards?
I recently just told John this. You know, I know a good week or two after I let him go that I wanted to go back and get him and just run as far as I could, but I wasn't able to. Within that first week, I was just mourning so bad. But when I get home the next day, I was immediately raped again by the man I was back with.
Oh, wow.
So it's a lot to the story, but in my eyes, God knew what He was preparing for my son. So, and I guess maybe that's why He had already decided where John was going to do and be and how he was going to live. And I'm so grateful that he's a man of God.
Isn't that neat that God has plans for us to prosper?
That's right.
He has plans for us that we don't even know, but He sees it. He's knitting us together in the womb, and He's already thought, I'm ordaining this guy right here for this job to work in my fields and to win people for me.
That's why I'm so graced and blessed, and mainly graced that God has allowed me to have time with Him and His family. I've got a beautiful daughter-in-law, beautiful 9-year-old granddaughter. I mean, it's just amazing.
Yeah, you think about how one life produces just more lives and just keeps going, right? We did on this show, as I was kind of sharing with you guys before we started here, when the movie Unplanned came out, you know, which really tackles this topic of abortion. The one thing that we hear over and over and over again that young people always say, no matter what circle you bring this up in, conservative, liberal, doesn't matter, they always bring up the rape component. If I was raped, then it's okay. You know, you have a license to go and take care of that life, right? But you know, it's amazing that even Hollywood and all those, they put that R rating on there, and they didn't want people at that age range between 13 to 17 to actually go and see that movie, because I believe that age range is where people make a decision. What's going to happen if you get into a situation like that you can't control, that happened to you? What are you going to do with it moving forward? And I think anytime we sit down and we say, Lord, this is outside of me, you are the one that has to take this life, and I'm dedicating him to you. And that prayer that you prayed, Lord, I just want to see him before. I mean, God made good on that promise.
He did, and it was all in His time. You know, there was I went to Unsolved Mysteries and another company to try to find him and 2 siblings that are missing, and I was blocked and all that. And I did not know about Ancestry DNA because that's just now come out in my time.
So you were basically looking as well.
Yeah, I just never looked. I didn't know Ancestry DNA, basically, the bottom line.
Right. Yeah, I'm so curious about this like, how do they know when they get the paperwork back for this? Because I've never done it before. Is it basically say you were born in this area, this region?
For ancestry?
Yeah.
No, it just gives you, it measures centimorgans, the number of points that you're connected in shared DNA.
Okay.
And it'll let you, someone would have had to be a part of that database. So submit their DNA to that database, and that's how you connect. And so a parent-child relationship is all the way on the highest end, basically. And over 3,000 connection points, 3,300, something like that. And so Mom and I, we did the DNA test, but we knew she was my mother.
We knew.
Before
I knew,
that,
yeah,
yeah.
before that. And the only reason I went ahead and done my end of a DNA test was for the formality of it. That was the bottom line.
So it lets you
And
know
it was
relationship.
immediately already, it
They were
came
like,
back. No,
yeah,
no
without a
doubt.
question, this
No,
is
no
it.
more questions.
Okay, so we're at this point right here, right? You now know this is your son. What happens next?
Oh, we move on.
Yeah.
He tries to fly me and run me all over the country. I said I wouldn't go to no more airports without tennis shoes or sandals.
She's been wearing her boots.
So as you guys are deciding to meet for the first time, in the video that you guys produced was really amazing, how it was kind of showing your story and your story interconnecting together, and how it was getting closer and closer to the point where you see them converge. I thought that was a well done piece.
Yeah, you gotta do that.
Yeah, you did a really good job. What was that like when you were walking up?
Nerve-wracking.
Yeah, when you were walking up, or knowing the day that you were going to meet this person that is connected to you.
For me, we had been speaking for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And we were trying to wait out the pandemic, and we finally said, well, let's just go for it. And so we just couldn't wait anymore. And we drove, my wife and I and our daughter, we drove for 7 hours because it was the best place to meet. And it just happened to be in the place Mom was born in. And so we drove there, and we rented a place and she got my grandmother, who's still alive, to come, and her husband of 21 years. As a matter of fact, one of the most touching moments of the entire reunion was the day after we talked on the phone for the first time. Her husband called me, Dwayne, and he said, I just want you to know that the very first date I had with your mother, she told me she had a son, and that one day you guys were going to be reunited.
Whoa.
So that let me know I had never been denied.
No, yeah, that's what I was going to say. He has never been denied. Anybody that I was with prior to my husband of 21 years and my husband of 21 years knew, look, I've got an older son, and I'm hoping one day that he'll come back into
that was intense.
my life. And his brothers, sister, cousins, aunties, uncles, everybody in the family knew about him.
Wow.
They
Got
just
it.
didn't. I don't think they expected everything to come to play the way it did.
Yeah.
But I was.
And we were always close to each other. My grandmother lived not far from my family in Florida. Mom and her husband, I call him Dad. He welcomes it. I'm happy. It's no problem for me. And they were living. They had his home was an hour and 15 minutes from where I went to undergraduate college, and so we were passing. I had aunts in one city I pastored in, cousins in another city I pastored in, and all of us were always near each other.
Right.
It just wasn't the right time.
It wasn't God's
Right.
time.
It just wasn't
It was
God's time.
never God's time until it was.
So
him.
in that moment, driving up, I think I was the night before I didn't sleep. I'm not a big caffeine drinker, so I was like, I didn't sleep and drove for 7 hours on sheer excitement and adrenaline and anxiety. And when we got close, we got there, and in that moment, I tell you, when we hugged for the first time, it somehow, and I hate to make it more magical than it is. It's not. It's spiritual.
No, it's spiritual.
It's real. Spirituality is real.
It
Magic
is.
is not.
It is, yeah. There's a
And
connection.
I could hear God's voice. I have a relationship with God. I love Him. He's my Father, and I am grateful for His love in my life. And like I said, the 38 years prior meant nothing. And in that moment, I could hear God say, I allowed you to go through what you went through so that you would know I always had your story in my hands. And I can only imagine if Mom decided to put my light out. And I think I've had I think 72 people the last time I looked, 72 individual people from different parts of the world, and said, I gave my life to Christ because of you in Africa, because of you
Praise
in
the
Europe,
Lord.
South America, and I saw your story, and I can't imagine if your mom had given up, I wouldn't be a Christian, and my husband or my wife or my children wouldn't be Christians, my neighbors. And so I think he allowed me to carry the rejection and not know the full story, because when the right moment came, he wanted me to know that it meant nothing in the full grand scheme of things. It doesn't feel like that when you're hurting.
Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't feel like that when you have anxiety or when you're depressed. You feel like that moment is everything.
Yeah.
But it is a moment, and it will pass.
There's so many stories in the Bible, like as you're talking, I'm thinking of Joseph, you know what I mean? Rejected by his brothers, sold, kicked down, put into prison. And that guy has every right to be angry, upset at God. What's up, dude? I'm following you, and look at what you've done to my life. And he still served him just unconditionally and just loved God. And also, I can't help but to think of like God, how he feels when he was separated from his son.
Sure.
And that,
I thought about that same thing, and I'm thinking, Lord, how did you do it? God, how did you handle that? With everything that God has been doing, it's just no way for us to comprehend. Because letting John go is a deep hurt. It's a very deep hurt. But I knew that God
he understands that.
Yeah.
He understands that, because we often talk about the suffering that Jesus did, and no doubt he went through an immense suffering. But the heart of God has the power to stop it and doesn't,
Right.
and has to shield himself from it. And you think like, okay, I have this conversation with my kids all the time about God's God's forever been, right? And they're always like, I don't understand that, right? So no time has God ever been separated from his son. And those 3 days must have been so excruciating.
Yeah.
And so I think God takes pleasure in seeing family members like this that get reunited together. I think it speaks to the heart of God.
And it speaks, especially when there's spirituality and God is foremost in the situation, it speaks out to more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you asked about the feelings. I know, Mom, you didn't share what were you feeling as you knew that moment was coming, as the day got closer.
Oh, you can't.
As we're coming on the property and.
Yeah, I couldn't explain the emotions. My husband's got a video of me pacing back and forth, and I was like, man, how much longer are they going to keep him? And they had him like 45 more minutes, and I'm thinking, Lord, how do I put all these words, all these feelings into words? There's just you can't. You just cannot.
Oh man, and when we hugged for the first time, it was. I don't know if you've ever made anything, and when you finish it, you're like, this is it, And in that moment, I don't know, I just felt this great sense of accomplishment. Greater, really, the only other time I felt that way was when my daughter was born. And so when she said, she hugged me and she whispered in my ear, you're my son. And this is the last time I held you was when I let you go in the hospital.
Yeah, that was,
and in that moment, just this flood of God's presence was just there, and like I had you the whole time. It's okay. You can let this go now.
So the question, because your experience is very different than a lot of experiences, some others that I've heard. I know a young man who was adopted, talked to him about it, and I've asked him, have you wanted to reconnect with your biological parents? And his response was, no, not really.
Yeah.
He was adopted by a very loving family, has a great support system. And I'm wondering, when you were contemplating all this, did you ever go through these thoughts of how would my life be different? Because you think about, if you have more family, it's like, well, now how do I split my holidays? And am I going to call that person mom, or am I going to call that person dad? Or you know what I mean? Did you go through thinking through some of that as you were contemplating your situation?
I think I didn't. I didn't like this trip today being here. This is the 4th time we've seen each other in our lives.
Wow.
And we talk every day, and we talk on Duo, and I don't know that I considered what that would look like. I knew I wanted to have a relationship. I didn't know what it would look like, and I didn't know my story. I didn't know my mother was raped and in an abusive relationship and I didn't know those details, and so I didn't have an idea of what I wanted. I think once we connected, I have still not considered. I tell you one thing that was very refreshing. We live in a very racially charged time, and my family is good Tennessee white, good Mississippi white, you know, good Southern white folk, you know. And but man, we've not talked about race one time.
Right.
Wow.
I was not.
Beautiful.
They were not white. I was not black in this instance. I don't like when people say I don't see color because you got to be blind not to.
Yeah.
But I will say, being in just we were just family. We sitting on the porch, drinking sweet tea, and you know,
And
my
one of the-
daughter shooting guns with her uncle and riding the AT.
That's awesome.
And
One
it
of
was beautiful.
The most precious things, going back to your question, is, you know, is he going to call me mom, or is he going to call me by my name, or by Miss Simmons, or anything like that? But the most precious thing to me is after we met, it wasn't none of that. It was just mom.
Wow.
And I just cried for like the first 2 weeks because I was like, he calls me mom.
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, it was just, it was that immediate connection there.
You brought up Joseph. I was thinking of Moses. You know, Moses was going to be killed if the mom didn't do something and put her in the basket. And look how God used Moses in such a great way to free people and bring people to the Lord. And it's just like, wow.
Yeah, no, it's been just a flood of experience, and I love to share. And I don't know, I guess when you're living it, you don't know how powerful it is, or like people are like, oh my, you know, I was telling some lady in the grocery store, she just started crying, and then she closed her lane, and the manager came over, and the manager started crying, and I was like, and I started crying, and I was like, I hope the people think they're crazy and not me. You know? I was like, but it was, I don't know, I guess it's like the gospel. When you come in contact with something good, you just want to tell people, and that's been really cathartic for me. Just telling people on the plane. I told one I was flying in somewhere, and my cousin who helped all of this come together in a sense because he connected with me. We went together to New York, and he found his birth mother.
Wow.
And
And so did
then-
it go over as well?
It was a little different.
Okay.
But it did go. It
Yeah,
was
it was well.
good for him.
Yeah.
He managed that well. It was nice.
Yeah.
I thought it was beautiful.
Yeah.
And I guess he was in it, so it's a little different for him.
Gotcha.
But then my brother, who has not seen his biological daughter, my biological brother, my younger brother, for 14 years, and she's 16 now. He reconnected with her.
Wow.
And so it's been a lot of beautiful connections as a result of it. It's just God's time. It's just God, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
When it comes to the details of things, we could really like freak ourselves out. over
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And how it happens with a lot of things, it's good to be prepared to think things through, but when you're actually in the moment, things just work themselves out in
Right.
such a beautiful way.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is so fantastic about being a Christian, with having that connection with Christ, because he takes care of the details. And
Yeah.
as soon as you met,
Yeah, but we still get lost in the details. We still have questions. We still have doubts at times. The stronger you grow your faith, though, the stronger those things go away.
Yep.
Yeah, I was even thinking like how you shared the story with someone in the checkout line, and you don't even know if those people are Christian or not. This is a story that can touch people's lives without that wall of Christianity or whatever. But they might get so touched and be like, well, why did you make these decisions? Why didn't you just abort? Well, because I'm a Christian.
No, yeah.
And now they are like, wow, you know, all this happened because of your beliefs and stuff, you know. It's a good way to share the gospel.
I do the same thing. I mean, everywhere I go, I'm still raising children, and I go to the orthodontist or a dentist or a doctor's appointment, and I see somebody, and I'm like, Lord, can I share there? And he'll nudge me, and I share it the same way. I'll go up to complete strangers. Hey, you want to hear a story?
Yeah.
You know, it's not about religion or nothing. It's
Yeah.
about God's grace.
So we went to a restaurant together once, just the two of us, and she's like, "Hey guys, this is my son.
Yeah.
This is my son."
I'm proud of him. I thank God for
Love
him.
it. Love it.
That was really nice.
I mean, it's really neat to see even you guys' interaction, because I mean, even just observing how you guys have been since the second you got here, it's a beautiful thing. Yeah. I mean, there is a warmness about your relationship now, and this is your 4th time hanging out.
And he
you know
loves
what I mean?
to prank me too.
Yeah.
He's already got me.
Yeah, my little brother, I opened the hotel last night and closed the door. I was like, he went down the hall. I don't know where he is. I'm going to go get that boy. We're like, we're just joking. We went to bed after that. That was too far.
But, and that's another thing amazing about God is because I have emotions that I've been dealing with where, should I be jealous? Am I jealous that this family that was so loving that God provided for him? From a mother's perspective, I still deal with some emotions that I put in God's hand because I'm still seeing, I'm not raising him, but I'm still there growing with him still. So there's a lot to the story. There's a lot going on.
I do have a question, like if you have any advice for mothers out there who are put in the situation of having to give up their child, how to maybe work through that, especially in the first few years. That's probably the most difficult.
Yeah, because there wasn't the first 5 years. I was thinking about this the other night, and I told John a little bit, but that first birthday, you missed that first birthday, and I wanted to light a candle, and each every 5th year, and then when he became a teenager, and those things they're impactful. They're very impactful. But when you put it, and I'm not going to say it's easy to say, okay, God, here's my emotions and feelings, and that's it. You have to really get down hard to let God have all of these emotions that you're dealing with, and not give up.
No, I'd say I've not been a mother, and I have no idea what it would be like. I can't even imagine, but I certainly would say that if my biological mother, had decided that she were going to abort me, that not only would my light have been put out, but the beautiful lights of all of the people that I've seen, the lives and the journeys that they've taken, that those would have not intersected in the way that they did. And so I would say, on behalf of every child who comes from a difficult or uncertain situation, give that child a chance, because your difficulty in that decision to allow them to be adopted could be their safe passage forward. And it might take 38 years like it did with my mother and I, but it was worth it. It was worth it.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Wow. Anything else you guys want to share about, kind of where you're going now?
Well, we're just going to continue on the journey that God has placed us on and hope that we can hold on.
Yeah. No, we've been reconnecting in different places. We went to my undergraduate college, where I am doing my doctoral program. I'm a professor now, and so she got to see my office and where I study and
I've
teach.
got to go back to where his parents went and were supportive of him and going to college in Huntsville, Alabama.
Yeah, in Oakwood.
Yeah, and I know they've got their enjoyment with their pictures and everything.
She got to see my name on a stone.
Yeah,
Nice.
he allowed me to get some pictures with him, to share in that joy with them as well. So I mean, it's a very special journey relationship that God has placed us in. I'm not going to let go as long as he don't let go.
Yeah.
And then if he lets go, I'm going to whoop him.
Yeah.
The only thing that, how DNA is like 99.99%, there's only like 0.1% that makes me like not sure she's
Still
my
a
mom.
little skeptical.
Yeah, she put sugar in her grits. So I'm like, I don't know if I came from you if you're doing this.
I do have 2 questions. The first one is, as someone who has found out that they're adopted, do you have any advice for them if they're in that decision of, should I reach out, or how do I feel about myself now that I found out that I'm adopted? My world has now shifted.
Sure. Well, I will say your identity is not your past, and your identity is not where you come from. That's a part of who you are. It's not who you are. And I certainly would say don't carry the sense of rejection and exercise rebellion because of it. The safest place And I have this verse here in Psalms 91, verse 1. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. The safest place for you to abide or dwell with all of those feelings is in God's presence, in his hands, in his care. And so you find yourself in a very dangerous place when you feel the overwhelming tide of rejection because you were adopted and you take that journey without Christ. And so take it with him. That's my first bit of advice. My second bit of advice is that I had a very supportive family. And my family, while they may not have understood what was happening internally, they gave me the support and nurture I needed to thrive. And that may or may not be your scenario. But what I will say is that don't expect people to understand what you feel, because even with all of the love and support, I still felt that there was something more I wanted to know. And that's valid and it's valuable. And if someone doesn't understand when you try to explain it, it's not because your experience is invalid. It is simply because they have not had that experience. So take it with Christ and own who you are, and be okay with what the future holds, because God holds the future.
Wow,
Amen.
powerful.
The second question was the next step forward. Someone who has decided, okay, I do want to reconnect. You talked about some resources that you used. Just asking if you could share what those were, and for those who are interested.
Absolutely. I used at-home DNA kits. I did 3 of them, and you can do 2 and just share your raw data. And so I won't give a plug because they're not paying me to give a plug, but you just find an at-home DNA kit, and with that, manage your expectations. My expectations were like way up here, and it shouldn't have been that high. I thought it would just immediately let me know. And it doesn't work that way. But when you do it, you will find connections. The database is large enough. You're talking about millions of people that have shared this DNA. And if you want to close that gap, that's a great place to start. I will share a group because they were so helpful to me, absolutely free. And they use social media. They use Facebook. It's called DNA Detectives. And welcoming community, very affirming. They don't allow any negative banter. I've heard some very strange stories, but they're very supportive. And if you, they have I think about 500,000 members in the group. And if you want to share your story there, it's very likely someone may reach out and help. I might be your search angel one day, because I hope to help somebody do what somebody helped me do.
And I'm still learning, so I can't help.
Well, what a beautiful, beautiful testimony, you guys, to come and bless us with. I mean, just I look forward to even hearing how this relationship is gonna move forward from here.
Oh, I'm already looking for our first Christmas.
That's
Our
so
first
awesome.
New Year's, you know,
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah, I want to mention this one thing. I had actually multiple people in my life that I've met that have lost a child, whether it be they died or were in a car accident or something. And I'm always very curious, to know, well, what is that pain like? And they describe losing a child there's no pain like that. And like you said, it's hard for me to fathom because I'm not there. I've never experienced that, so it's hard for me to even wrap my head around it. But one interesting thing that one of the guys that lost his daughter when she was 18 years old, she just had an aneurysm and passed away in the morning on the way to school. He said, as much pain as there is, God opens a door for love. And it's like the deeper the pain, the deeper the ability to experience love. To me, that's God's way of really balancing out. You know what I mean? You've had a painful beginning. And so now the every little moment is so precious for you that you're going to enjoy it. The taste of it is so much grander.
That's true.
You know what I mean? And so moving forward, I think it's really neat. Please, enjoy every moment and those family times that you get a chance to build memories. You have a chance to build more memories down the road and even into eternity. So thank you for coming on our show. You guys got any other questions?
No, this was a blessing.
I just like
man.
to say you guys are incredible. And
Yes,
thank you for letting
praise
me
God,
know.
praise
thank
God.
I
you.
am so grateful for what you do.
Yes.
And you have been a blessing to my journey. And I know
And to
praise
mine,
God,
and
yes.
I'm sure to 3 more back there.
Praise God, praise God. Well, tell us a little bit about your ministry as well, because if any of you are watching out there, I mean, if you've traveled around and even shared the gospel in this way, and you want him to come and speak at your church, how can they get in contact with you?
Well, you can follow me at on Facebook on my fan page, John T. Boston II. That's Roman numeral 2 or II. Also on Instagram. I lecture and teach around the world. I focus on helping people overcoming trauma and live successful lives and rise above their pain. And so I'd love to support your journey, and I'd love to hear your story. So do follow me. And also this video that's coming out Friday or in a couple of days, I'm not sure when this will be seen, but I want you to see that, the story of our reunion. And there are details that weren't shared here that are shared on that video.
Well, thank you guys for tuning in, and we hope that you were as blessed as we were. I know I definitely enjoyed this conversation completely. And keep us in your prayers, keep them in your prayers, keep other people that you may know are going through this exact same experience. And you know, this is the struggle of life that we're all engaged in. But God has our best interest at heart, and if we put our trust in Him and we stay connected to Him, God will not let us down. He is the God of wanting us to experience joy and pleasure and things in our lives. So put your trust in God. We hope that you guys had a blessed time. Like this video, share this video. Maybe this is something that somebody else needs to hear. Please forward it, and we hope to see you guys next Friday on LED Live.